You could just make Augie the mascot of your podcast if you
Oh
want.
my
He
gosh,
works
he's
cheap.
so cute.
Oh man, did we get another wave? Maybe.
No,
Oh,
he's
let me see if I
busy
can bait him. Augie.
Did we get a wave? I don't think so. Probably not, because I'm recording now, and every time this happens.
Oh!
Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenn deMoll. Just there's now that we got that going on. All right. So hello, everybody, and welcome to the Catholic Leadership Network podcast, helping ministry leaders succeed from the beginning. We're here to talk about all the stuff no one told you about ministry leadership. And today we are here with Kenn deMoll. It's great because, you know, Christy and I have these little notes back and forth. And we type up questions for each week just to kind of get us kicked off the ground. But she's got this little note in here that says, I think these are enough questions because it's only 30 minutes, but 30 minutes isn't even close enough time to contain the force that is Kenn deMoll. The force that is Kenn.
I wrote that.
I agree.
Thanks, friend.
Oh my goodness. Kenn, would you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself with our listeners here, and just a little bit about how you got into ministry?
Sure, yeah. So my name has been stated. I've been blessed to be married to my wife for 14 years this August, and we have 4 kids that are out of control. We're building a house, which is a perpetual blessing and a curse. I do ministry out of Westminster, Maryland, for obviously a Catholic church there where I'm a youth minister. How I got into youth ministry was, our ministry in general was really more of an accident. God kind of knocking me. I went to college. I had no plans for after college, which was probably a really dumb idea. And about a month or two before graduation, I was like, oh, I need a job. That's probably something really important. So I like went to a couple of job fairs, and I was like really haphazardly like gathering applications. And I decided I was going to be like a police officer. My parents thought this was a terrible idea, but I thought I was going to be a police officer. And I contacted my former youth minister and said to him, you know, hey, I need a reference because like the book they give you is like that thick. And he said to me, he was pretty bold. He said, no, I don't think you're supposed to be a police officer. I think you're supposed to be involved in ministry. And I laughed because I had never even thought about that. And he was like, well, just pray about it. And I was in the habit of going to daily mass for Lent, which 6:30 for a college student, that was an actual fast sort of moment. So I went to mass that later that morning, and I knelt down in prayer and said, God, do you want me to? And it was like one of those moments where God very clearly answered me and said, yes. He wouldn't even let me finish the question. He's like, get in there, do it. And there have been a couple of times where I've tried to get out of it. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. And God keeps knocking me back into it. So I've stopped resisting.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. You know, it's so funny when God is like so blatant and bold with us. You know, there's moments of clarity where you're like, why can't all decisions be this clear? You know, and then God tends to put into place those things to get us where he's calling us. So thank you for joining us today. This is really fantastic. So one of the things that we wanted to chat with folks about is about recruiting volunteers. And I don't necessarily know if I love the word recruiting, but that tends to be how we go with things and the phraseology that we use. But you know, you tend to be able to surround yourself with really good people that are out there and doing ministry. How do you do that? How do you invite volunteers to be part of your ministry and to run things? Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, first, it actually came from kind of a place of desperation, because I think I got to a point, especially in my first couple of years of doing ministry, where I had like 2 real volunteers, and that it was not enough to do the ministry that we were doing. And they were burnt out. They were angry. We had like a parking lot meeting where they were like, something has to change. And at that point I was like, I'll recruit anybody like a warm body, pulse, like please come and help me. And that didn't work either. That made things absolutely worse. And I really think it was actually kind of a God moment. I went to a training, um, and I stumbled into a talk that I thought was something else, and it was about how do you recruit volunteers. And I didn't really like the speaker, and I was like, oh, it's gonna be a waste of my time, but I'm already here. So I sat down. I was like aggressively doodling in the back because I didn't want to be there. And the speaker said something that just totally blew my brain, and it stuck with me. It was just one line in this talk, and in that moment, it really changed my perspective forever on how you speak to adults about ministry. And he said that when he pitched ministry to people at his parish, he oftentimes described it as like being a big brother or a big sister, like a mentor. And that led to like this scattering of ideas where I realized that I think when we talk about ministry or getting people involved, they really don't know what it is. They just hear like, I need help. And so that's why you get the warm bodies. That's why nobody wants to do it, because especially in my world, youth ministry, I started thinking about it. And I was like, I think people have these misconceptions that either you need to be like an expert at your faith, like have a PhD and be a professional theologian, or it's some kind of like babysitting service where the kids are terrible and you need like the whip in the chair to control them. So it's like in controlling that pitch and really explaining what you want people to do and how you present that, I think really kind of opened my eyes and really changed how I viewed recruiting people to join ministry.
Oh, wow. That's really powerful. And I'm thinking about the any warm body bringing in that happens a lot of times in ministry. Can I just poke right there for a second? Do you have any thoughts on how do you clean up the any warm body kind of situation? If you've done that to yourself, or you step into a role and that's what you've got, like, do you have, well, maybe that's too far down the line. Is that too far down the line, Sarah? Should we talk about something else more initial? Or, I mean,
no, let's go. Where this
okay.
No, I think that's good. So I hear two things in that. I think first off, the way that you avoid like keeping yourself in that mode is when people come to you, and I have like a rough process that I use to help recruit that I can share about. But you really need to listen, and you really need to practice that listening skills of why people are coming to you. And I think in my earlier days, I was certain, like, if someone showed up and they wanted to talk to the youth minister about getting involved, it's because they wanted to do youth ministry the way I had it in my head. And I remember very early on, I picked up this guy, and he was great. He was awesome. Like, the kids loved him. But the only thing he would talk to me about was like starting like a youth flag football league. And we had like we did like flag football like once or twice a year. So I talked to him about that. But this is all he would talk to me about. And after like one night, he dropped out and he vanished. And like, I never saw him again. He wouldn't return our emails. And I was really frustrated until I thought about it. And I was like, he wanted to start a flag football league. Like, that's what he was looking to do. He wasn't looking to do youth ministry the way I wanted to do it. And I think that's part of it, is like listening to people about why they're coming to you. Like, what is it that they think ministry is, and having that open dialogue and just being real and being like, we're not a rec league. If that's something you want to do, maybe there's a place for it here at the church. But kind of this is the focus that I'm looking at. I think that helps you keep people who are actually on point for the mission you want to do. I think the other thing that's involved is it's having hard conversations with people. It's being willing to enter into those moments, trying to mentor people a little bit and maybe give them some different experiences, giving them some different resources. But it's that thing of really trying to help people. And then if they're not able to change or grow, you got to cut them loose for their benefit and for the benefit of the ministry. I mean, I remember I had to do this once with a volunteer. I tried her in all different kinds of ministry. I tried her in all different kinds of positions. It was not going to happen. And so I had to have that hard conversation. And I mean, she was crying. She was begging to stay involved. And it's not a mean thing, but I asked her, and I just said, like, explain to me how you match these points of ministry that we've spent a year talking about. And she didn't have an answer. And I was like, this is why. Like, this is not you're mean, you're a terrible person. It's just you're called to do something else. And we have to help you figure out what that is.
Yeah, talking to people about their gifts and talents and connecting them into that, their strengths and how strengths, you know, connect with the church in various ways. I think that's important too, you know. Gosh, those hard conversations are really difficult, you know. You know, you mentioned these hard conversations, and you mentioned, you know, just bringing in anybody. We're talking about cleaning up that a little bit. You know, what's the best thing that you've ever seen or done to bring volunteers on?
So where I got my inspiration was right when I got out of college. I think, like most young people, I got sucked into doing multi-level marketing, and I'm not knocking that, but I think the one I got involved with was terrible. But like, what it really kind of taught me is this idea of like, how do you package something, and how do you try to really encourage people to be a part of that? And I read some stuff. There was a really interesting book on youth ministry by Mark DeVries called Sustainable Youth Ministry. And he pointed out that pretty much universally, and I would say this is probably true of other ministries in the church, is that the number one thing we need is volunteers. But then when you look at how you spend your time on a week-to-week basis, like recruiting or reaching out to volunteers is almost never on that action item list. And so it really made me realize that we need kind of some sort of plan, some kind of approach. Like, it can't be, you know, 2 months before you're starting faith formation or a month before your retreat being like, I need like 7 people to do this, please. You know, God, send me 7 people. Like, there needs to be this intentional approach to how to do it. So roughly breaking, here's the steps that I learned from that, and also from multi-level marketing. So the first thing I realized was just figuring out, like, how many volunteers do I actually need? Like, we always need volunteers, but it's like, what is that goal? Like, quantify it and define it, right? And I would define mine based off of how many small group leaders do I need. If I want small groups of 8 and I've got, you know, 20 kids, you're going to need 3 leaders to do that, right? And you scale it based off of what you need. The second thing that I would do is I would take a legal pad, and I would just generate names, just generate a ton of names. And these might be people I would know. I would ask my pastor, I'd ask the staff, I'd ask with teenagers, you know, I'd ask trusted parishioners, just who do you know that you think might be good at doing X? I dig into our parish database, and I look at who went through RCIA a year or 2 ago and reach out to them, you know,
or 2 or 3 ago.
Yeah, or 2 or 3 ago, right? Like, dig into those lists, right? You know, who recently got married at the church, reach out to them. You know, who's kind of, you know, what happens with new registrations. I think a lot of the times those just kind of go into a database and we start sending them letters, right? Like, when was the last time we reached out to them to really try to get them? You know, I would also do the thing of the bulletin pitch. I mean, I think that's kind of a last resort. I really think drumming up names is really, really important. And then I would email these people, and I came up with a script that I used that I think was pretty good. I would always the reason I would do email first is I feel like sometimes when you call people, it kind of becomes like a pressuring situation. And so you want people to have a chance to kind of like think about it. And so, like, if they're trying to get the kids dinner, or they're trying to get out the house to a meeting, and they're like, hey, I've got 2 minutes. And you're like, hey, I want you to sign up for a year of doing X at the church. Like, that's probably not the best moment to ask that question, right? So
that's an easy, like that's a hard no, right?
Right. Email is a low threshold ask, right? You can follow up with a phone call, but email's a great place to start. And I would always entitle my email prayer request, because any good Catholic is going to open an email that says prayer request. If you say need help, delete, ignore. Like, oh, maybe on the weekend when I'm catching up on emails, right? But prayer requests, that seems a little bit urgent, but it's also something you want to enter into. And then I would always start my email. I'd say, I'd introduce myself. I'd say, listen, I was talking to Father. I was talking to our teens. If I didn't have anybody, I would just, it was me who came up with them. I was like, somebody thought you would be good at X, whatever X is. And then I would usually include like a video if I had one that gave like a very brief 1 to 2 minute summary of the ministry, of what I was looking for them to do. I was like, this is what we're trying to accomplish. I would love for you to be a part of this. Here's my cell phone. Let's set up a time to talk about this. I wouldn't talk a lot about like the logistics of this is how much time you're going to spend. This is the regular meetings of it. Because I didn't want to give people reasons to say no right out of the gate. I just wanted them to have this broad picture of what the ministry could be. And I was trying to get them excited because I think things that we're excited about, we're willing to prioritize because, I've been doing youth ministry now for almost 16 years and Sunday nights are terrible. I hate doing youth ministry on Sunday nights. It would not be the time that I would pick to do youth ministry, right? But the reason I do it there is because I'm passionate about it and I'm willing to do it. And I think the same thing is true of your volunteers. If they're willing to see how, wow, I can make a difference doing this, or wow, this would be really, really impactful. I'm willing to do this. When I've done the pulpit pitch for ministry positions, I am a big believer that, you don't want to do that thing of desperation. You don't want to get up there and say, we need 7 people, or we can't do faith formation, the mission trip, whatever. What I really like to do is I really like to put people up there who have been powerfully impacted by that ministry. So for me, it's teenagers, right? Saying 30 seconds, I'll work with them a little bit to help craft a message. Just how have you encountered Christ in this ministry? And that's like, catching thousands of fish in the net, right? Because people hear these stories. And again, it's like, wow, like that's awesome. God is really doing something there. And I always try to help them craft how an adult made an impact in their life. So it's not just, hey, we went to this retreat and it was awesome. It was, I went to a retreat with Miss Becky and Miss Becky helped me encounter Christ, right? And it's like, wow, I could be Miss Becky, right? Like Miss Becky was just willing to give her time to this ministry and make it happen. Okay, so that's the pitch. If you can get somebody on the hook, that's the next step. That's where we kind of talk a little bit about logistics. I ask them to really prayerfully consider if this is something that they can actually commit to time-wise. This is where I go over expectations for the ministry. Again, really trying to make it clear about, what we're looking for in terms of who we want involved. If I have expectations of meetings or things I want them to do or not to do. And if everything sounds good, at that point, what I do is I give them an application. And so it's a little bit of a biographical feed on it, get some information about them, a little bit about their spiritual walk. And after the application, we do an interview. We talk things out, and really this is me. And usually I'm able to say this for most interviews because by this point, you've really eliminated a lot of the warm bodies. Like if people get to this point where they're willing to sit down with you after doing an application, they're probably pretty serious. And I always tell them jokingly at the end of the interview, I was like, really, the goal of this is to make sure you're not weird in front of the kids. And it's like, we owe that to the teens, right? Like we don't want the rando who is desperate to have meaning in their life. So they sign up to help with, whatever. And they're just weird, and not weird in like a bad way, but, they want to talk about things that, it's strange, and so, they're good people, right? They're relatable, they connect. And that's not an age thing. Some of the best volunteers I've worked with in youth ministry have been in their upper 60s, even in their 70s, right? So it's not an age thing. It's this ability to relate to people that are different. And that's what you're looking for, and that they give you a feeling that they can connect that they're willing to be open, honest. They're not crabby. Like when I've done mission trips with teenagers, that gets a lot of adults really excited about doing work and stuff like that. I always have to say to them, all right, I need to paint you this picture. It's Wednesday night on a week-long mission trip. You're tired. You've been sleeping on the floor, and they're teenagers, so they're starting to get a little annoying. Well, Wednesday night, you go back, and guess who's still there? The teenagers. And guess what? They're going to be there for another 3 days. So if that doesn't fill you with joy, this is not what you're supposed to do. Okay. But if it does fill you with joy, I'd love to continue to talk about that. So after go ahead.
I was going to say, so if that's not your happy place, you probably need to find your happy place elsewhere, right?
Somewhere else. Yeah. Because again, it's clarifying those expectations. And, I think adults like something like the mission trip, it's like, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to serve. I'm going to go with teenagers. It's going to be great. But you need to explain to them that, hey, at 10 p.m., they might decide to have a dance party and you really want to go to bed. And that's okay. But you need to understand that maybe this is going to happen. And it's not going to be, hey, everybody goes to bed at 8 p.m. It's just there's going to be that real life that happens. And that's a part of any industry, right? So after you do the interview, if things are good, again, because youth ministry, child protection stuff, they do that. I always like to invite them to do like a trial run of things. And so invite them in. I partner them up with somebody who has been doing ministry for a little bit, because I like to get their feelings on things. Like, you feel like this person is a good fit. And if everything works, plug them on the team. They're good to go.
Yeah, I wrote down so many notes during this rundown, Ken. There's some of the things that I was doing already, but there's other things that I think really stuck out for me. One of the things I wanted to point out was, I say run the bulletin ads, but use it as a reference point for the people that you're actually speaking to with regard to the ministry. So you could have some details there, but I wouldn't have zero expectation that someone's going to call you and say, oh, I saw this in the bulletin and I wanted to reach out. That's not going to happen. But you could say to somebody like, Ken, if I was talking to you and said, hey, Ken, I think you'd be really great in youth ministry. I have a note in the bulletin. You could take a peek there to get some information, but let's talk more on, at a time that's really good for you, that sort of situation.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. It is funny. I have to say, every time I poo-poo the bulletin, I legitimately got two of my best volunteers from a rando bulletin ad. I mean, and it's like, it was one of those things like, they're godparents now to one of my kids, and like we take vacations together. It's just like, hey, I saw this ad, like I thought I'd give you a call, and so I guess miracles really do happen. But I love that insight, Christy. I think that's good. I think the thing is, to maybe build off of that is, it's like I think the reason why static things like that don't work is because people want to feel called. They want to feel invested. They want to feel, and again, you look at scripture, right? That's exactly what Christ did. He didn't, put an ad in the synagogue bulletin. I don't even know if they had those, and just said, hey, looking for 12 guys to go change the world. Call me. I'll sit in my office.
You call or email with questions.
That's so funny. Well, the other
you went
thing
out and found these guys.
The other thing about the bulletin is encouraging parishioners to make that ask as well. Like, people who are reading the bulletin know people that you and I might not know. And so, maybe even wording in there, if you know somebody who has these gifts, invite them to give us a call and check this out and give this a try to use their gifts and talents for our parish. I think that's another way, because we don't know everybody. I mean, we've got how many hundreds of families in our parishes, and, people are upset because, staff doesn't reach out. Well, there's a couple hundred families, so it's really tough for staff to reach out to everyone. And so if there's a way that we can encourage other parishioners to be part of that voice and part of that invitation, so anybody who's already on your team being part of that invitation, as well, I think is important too. Go ahead, Christy.
I was going to say, can I just add something there? I think that one of the other things I think is important, and I didn't hear you say it, Kenn, but I'm sure that it's in your mind, is being okay with no on the outset when you go to ask somebody. And my famous trick, so I was a recruiter for a staffing company before I got into church ministry. And my little trick there that I learned was, if you're going to tell me no, I understand, I get it, whatever. Can you give me 2 or 3 names that I could reach out to as well? Because I think one of the other things is good people know good people. And so there's a lot of reasons why somebody, like I have a lady I can think of right now off the top of my head that I would love to have as a small group leader in youth ministry. She's super devoted to God. She's a great mom. She's well balanced, you know what I mean? She's got a great personality, and there's just so many things going for her that are terrific. But I know that if I would ask her, hey, could you do this? She's going to have to tell me no, because her schedule constraints are the real deal. But she's one of those parishioners that knows other great parishioners that I don't know. And it's so exactly to your point, Sarah, like even the people that you're recruiting know people that you don't know, and you can ask them for those points of references. The other trick I used to tell them was, if you tell me 3 names, I swear I won't tell them that you gave me their name.
Amen.
I won't rat you out.
Can I dovetail with that, Christy? I think that's really important, because I think one of the reasons we don't recruit is because we are afraid of saying no, or being told no, getting shot down. And I think that was something the MLM stuff taught me, was it's like, you build this massive list of people, and that the vast majority of them are saying no. But the reason you cycle through it is to find those yeses. And that's where the work comes in. Exactly what you're saying is someone might say no, but it might be a yes in 6 months or a year from now, right? Or maybe that person says, I'm not the right fit for you, but let me talk. You want to talk to my wife or my brother or something like that. And so getting the no's is really that path to finding. It's just doing the work, and it's part of the business, of sifting through that stuff.
Well, and no is not to you. It's not about you. Sometimes we feel like no is a personal slight against us. It has nothing to do with us, really. For the most part, I mean, they might not like you, but they're not going to, whatever. That's 99% of the time. That's not the case. It's not about us or our feelings, or it's about the situation. They're saying no to the request, to the situation at hand. And if we can take ourselves out of that, it's sometimes easier to hear no. If we realize it's about the situation and it's not about me, that I don't want to say easier, because it's always hard to hear no, but you can kind of start to see within the situation that it's about something that's outside of myself.
I like Kenn's idea though of the shadowing, because like having people come in and sort of ghost in at a particular ministry, because the other thing I think is what you think the ministry is versus what it actually is can also be a factor here, where you have an idea of like, I remember whenever I first became a catechist, I also thought like you needed a PhD in theology in order to do that. I found out that actually you don't even probably need to know much about, no, I'm just kidding. But my point is, I said at that time, initially, I can be a helper, because I felt overwhelmed by the whole entire situation. And it wasn't until I got into it that I realized like, oh, maybe I do have some giftedness and skills here. And that's the other thing too. I think there's a matter of trust between you, the leadership ministry person, and the person that you're bringing in. What level of trust do they have, and how believable? Because I think, Kenn, too, you made a point earlier, like I've said to them, I see in you what those gifts are and abilities are. But you said, you could use like, Father Mark or Father John said that he thinks that you would be great at this, or, Deacon George said blah, 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 or Sarah Jerzembowski told me about you, that sort of stuff also helps lend credibility to, you're not just blowing smoke for somebody to try to hook them, but you're actually earnestly telling them what gifts that you see in them.
Absolutely. And, that's where I think, again, we as ministry leaders maybe need to get get a little bit broader and think, if somebody isn't a good fit for whatever you've asked them to do, small group leader or classroom catechist or something, but maybe you do see gifts in them, what can we utilize that person for without saying you're not the right fit, kick them to the curb, I mean, I feel like I constantly just need people to help me do like administration on the ministry, like whether that's help me clean a closet that's like completely, impacted and filled with stuff, or, go through data sets and track attendance and, all this stuff. And I mean, that's maybe a gift that somebody who doesn't want to work directly with kids might find and excel at. Maybe someone just wants to do shopping for you. I one time knew a youth minister who had a friend who was a cop who really wanted to do ministry, but he wanted nothing to do like directly interacting with teens. So he would come up on retreats in his cop car and just introduce himself during the night and say, "Hi, I'm Officer such and such. I'll be security tonight." And he would just sleep in his car, but it was like to discourage any of the kids from, sneaking around or staying up late or stuff like that, because they look out the window and be like, "Oh, it's Officer Smith," and I mean,
love this.
It's just, there's all different kinds of ways people can serve. I had a woman once who was so busy she couldn't get involved in ministry directly, but she was a baker, and we did like a night on like medieval stuff. So she baked us a cake in the shape of a castle, for the kids to eat. Right. So, I mean, I think it's just about being creative and thinking, who is the Lord giving you? What are their gifts? And maybe if it's not small group leader or trip leader or catechist, how do you still weave that in and make them a part of your team?
Well, and that too makes me think about, the broader church as well. And if youth ministry is not it, well, maybe RCIA is. Or maybe one of the other ministries in our parishes. All of our ministries are looking for volunteers. So, while we're coming into this through the lens of youth ministry, all of our ministries are looking for volunteers. We can use this pathway, this method for any of our ministries. But if we can keep an eye on what's going on in the wider church, I think that we can say also, if they're not really for the ministry that we're involved in, you know what, as we're praying about this, what comes to mind is this ministry here. Do you think, could I introduce you to so-and-so? And maybe we can just have a three-person conversation about how your gifts might benefit the people in this ministry. So it's not a hard no. It's a let's use your gifts to the best and fullest of their abilities. We want you to be the most full human being that God created you to be. This ministry is not going to allow you to do that, but maybe this ministry over here will get you to that place. So
yeah. Can I build off of that for a second? I think you're making a wonderful point. Something that, how do we, like, I think it's really important to check in with your volunteers at least once a year and give them a chance to rediscern. Because, too often it becomes, we get somebody and it's like, no, don't go anywhere. I need you for the next 70 years to do this ministry, right? And maybe they're only called, I encourage my volunteers to think about it as a yearly commitment. And that doesn't mean you can't renew for multiple years, but it just means the end of each year, take a pause and say, are you supposed to recommit for the next year? And also it's a good time for you to maybe look at them and say, maybe you're called to do something different. And, a point that you brought up, Sarah, I think sometimes ministers within the church, we get a little territorial with our volunteers. It's like, Keith is mine, I'm not going to share him, but like, I think, again, we need to be better to the body of Christ to say, I've had that situation before where a couple of people in youth ministry, like, they love the catechesis, but they weren't always excited about like the shaving cream and the mud pits and stuff like that. So in talking with them, it's like exactly what you said. Maybe you're better suited to do RCIA. Like, you're really passionate about reaching people who maybe are not the best formed, but you don't want to dive into a mud pit to do it. So guess what? Maybe RCIA is a better fit for you.
Well, and let me add on to that, is that what I say about that situation is that if we appreciate that people are growing and developing in their own personal discipleship, then how they want to interpret how they offer ministry to the parish is going to grow and change and be different. So like initially, like I found that for myself, being a fourth grade catechist was one of the great loves of my life. But then, I grow in my own faith and understanding and realize that like, that's fun, but it's not actually the best use of my gifts and abilities. And that I probably ought to be teaching adults now, you know what I mean? And that sort of thing, or becoming the leader, or however we need to grow and develop and expand people's their personal discipleship, but also what their gifts are, the whole thing. I mean, you guys, this has been a really good conversation.
We have just blown past our time, y'all. Way past our time. So, but it's a great conversation, and I think it's a needed conversation. So, Kenn, maybe we can come back to you at another time to continue the conversation on discipleship and volunteerism, and how we can really engage our adults and our leaders in ministry. I mean, our job is to help them to be what God created them to be, no matter what ministry that is. So we invite you back, Kenn.
Great. I'll be happy to do it.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this week on the Catholic Leadership Network podcast, helping ministry leaders succeed from the beginning. And today we were talking about volunteerism. If you have any ideas, thoughts about volunteers and how best practices that you've seen in play, please feel free to share with us below on our social media. Facebook group, YouTube channel. We are out there on almost every platform. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you real soon.
Peace.